Story time! This is the wedding story of Renate and Magnus. We have two beautiful parent albums and the main album in this beautiful box. Looks like this. The parent albums are 20 by 20 centimeters and the wedding album is 25 by 25. This is Renate and Magnus's wedding day story. Magnus and his groomsmen, they got ready at the barber shop. They got some clothes, shaves, and some fancy hairdos. This barber shop is so cool, and the barbers have tattoos and fancy mustaches, all of them. Renate chose to get ready at her aunt's hair salon with, of course, her aunt and her sisters. That's also her bridesmaids, two of her friends, and her mom. When I photograph getting ready photos, my main focus is to document what is happening, like who did the bride choose to spend her morning with. So here you can see all the girls are hanging out. When focusing on what's happening instead of trying to photograph a step-by-step tutorial on how to put makeup on a bride, I get these photos where Renate, the bride, and her mom reflected on something and she started crying and got really emotional. And the guys getting all fancy with the tuxedo and bow tie, getting the final touches from the barbers. And the groom had a flask with some, some good stuff inside, and they were sharing it in the car on the way to the ceremony. And I love this photo that my second shooter captured, where one of the groomsmen was kind of taking the groom's pulse, and he was very nervous or excited. Here, Renate's sister was helping her putting on the dress. Realizing what's happening is always evoking some emotions. Some of the photos in this album are blurred, and that's because they are photos of the nephews and nieces of the bride and groom, and their parents didn't want their kids to be showcased in this video. Renate's dad came to the hair salon to pick her up, and this is the exact moment where he saw her in the dress for the first time. And I managed to position myself where I got Renate in the mirror, and I could focus on the dad and his reaction to her. So I got both of their faces in the same photo. Even though, like this photo, where you can obviously see that this is the bride and this is the dad, looking at her with being proud and smiling. I still love doing these types of photos, but if I can find a situation where I see both of their faces, that's the shot. Here he is helping her, putting on the necklace. And again, I managed to position myself where I got the bride in the mirror, and her sister and her friend and her dad, they were laughing at something that she said. Outside the salon, her mom and aunt was helping Renate getting into the car and driving to the church where Magnus and his groomsmen, they were already there, and they were welcoming all the guests that was arriving. This is a really good reason to have a second shooter. So I was with the bride and my second shooter was with the groom. So the second shooter was already at the church and was photographing all the people arriving. You can see all these beautiful and real moments in your wedding album instead of having just formal post photos. And this is the moment where they saw each other for the first time, and Magnus was getting very emotional, which is always fun to photograph. I'm skipping a few pages containing the kids, so the story is a little broken because of that, just so you know. Renate and Magnus read their vows to each other at the ceremony, which is not so typical here in Norway, and I thought it was a very beautiful thing to add a personal touch to a church ceremony. And they finally became husband and wife and walked down the aisle. After the ceremony, I always try to capture all the smiling faces. This is usually the part of the day where you see all of your guests for the first time, because you spend the time somewhere else in the morning, and then after the ceremony, that's when you see everyone that you invited. So there's a lot of emotions, a lot of hugs and smiling faces, and sometimes tears. and it's a fun thing to photograph, and it makes for a beautiful spread in the album. They wanted to have a bubble exit, which was carefully orchestrated by my second shooter. She had done this a lot of times before. So she made sure that the guests was standing in line and that they didn't blow all the bubbles right away. And they waited until they actually exited from the church. And that made for some beautiful photos, as you can see. They chose to rent a car, kind of like Cruella de Vil car, and it was pretty cool. And then we went for some portraits and group photos with the bridal party. And when I saw this opening in the trees, I immediately knew we had to do a Disney-style silhouette photo. So I carefully placed them underneath the trees and framed them in this opening so that they pop out of the photo like this. Some classical portraits of them. This is a very typical stone fence from the area where the bride is from. While I was out with the bride and groom photographing portraits, my second shooter was with all the guests at the venue and documenting what was happening there. And they were all doing a quiz that the bride and groom made. Kind of an icebreaker thing, because the bride is from the west side of Norway and the groom is from the east side of Norway, so they had guests coming from different places, and a lot of people and a lot of the guests had never met before. I was out with the bride and groom doing portraits until we arrived at the venue and all the guests were welcoming them. And then we did some formal group photos, which is kind of boring but also kind of important. Line up the most important and the closest people to you and have them look into the camera and smile. It's nice to have many years from now. Before dinner, all the guests were mingling inside and outside. Some of them were writing some nice messages in the guest book that they made from their engagement photos. And then it was time for the speeches. You will see a lot of different angles from all of the speeches because we were two photographers. I always try to focus on who is speaking, but also trying to capture who is listening to the speech. When you have two photographers, we can really cover that from many different angles. Her dad gave her this yellow sign that he stole from a camping site in France when they were on vacation when they were kids. He stole, I think, 3 similar signs, and he's giving them to the kids as a wedding gift for some reason during the wedding speech. So this was a very particular family thing that I've never seen before, and I love documenting things that are pretty unique to the bride and groom. When the guests are clinging on the glass, it means the bride and groom has to stand up on the chairs and kiss. In between courses, I don't remember who started it, but one of the guests started to fold paper plane from the menu at the table and threw the plane around, and then more and more guests caught on, and it started to become a big paper plane scene. It was super fun, and the bride, she threw a paper plane that landed in someone's glass. So I'm glad I managed to capture that. It's all those moments in between that makes every wedding unique, so I make sure to make an effort to try to tell that story with my camera. Here, Magnus's parents was having a speech. And then Renate's sisters. You can see all these different angles showcasing both the speaker and the people who are listening to the speech. Then there was a song, I believe. And then grandma wanted to have the speech, and the bride's friends. Anything personal that you bring to your wedding is always fun for me to photograph, but I think for you, it's always fun to look back at after. So in this case, they had this game where they throw these sticks, and photographing people in action is something that is really fun to have in your wedding album. This brought back memories from when I used to work in a newspaper and I photographed sports events. The editor in the newspaper always said, Eirik, you need to have the ball in the shot. So if it was handball or football or it was ice hockey, you need to have the puck. Like, the ball or the puck or the thing they're using needs to be in the shot. If not, it's not a good shot. So here I made sure that in all the photos I have the stick that they're throwing in the shot. You can see the stick there, you can see the stick here, you can see the stick in the sky over there. I always try to keep the ball in the shot. The venue was changing style in the dining room, and here some of the guests were writing in the guest book, and generally people were just hanging around and having fun, and then they cut the cake. In Norway we have something we call kransekake, cake. I don't know the English term for it, but it's dough made by almonds, and we usually hang some kind of firecrackers that you don't light. You kind of rip them apart and it pops, and inside there is a dirty joke and these paper crowns. So people were reading these dirty jokes and wearing these paper crowns, and the bride and groom actually chose to wear those paper crowns for their first dance, which was pretty cool. The dance floor took off. I love photographing dance floors and trying to capture the energy and the movement and how fun people have at the dance floor. You see sing-along, see dancing, and that's where your friends and family, the true selves, comes to shine. The guys were smoking cigars, so we did a cigar shot and some more dancing photos. And of course, the last photo. For those of you who know me, I always do a last photo at the wedding. This is a perfect way to end the album. So instead of ending the album with a dance floor photo or cutting the cake photo or whatever happens late at night, a proper artistic ending to your wedding album is, in my opinion, much nicer. I've designed so many albums where the last photo, weren't there. And after a while, I started incorporating this artistic nighttime silhouettes, multiple exposure, long exposure, light painting type artistic photos to end the album with. That's something that I try to do different every time for every client. So that was Renate and Magnus's wedding day story.